In the last video, we spoke about Ichigo's substitute shinigami form, covering everything from how he had first acquired his shinigami powers, as well as the extent of the abilities that he demonstrated during his substitute shinigami phase. In this video, I want to carry on from where I left off, and discuss the training that Ichigo undergoes with Urahara in order to acquire his own shinigami powers. And upon activating his shinigami powers, we get the first glimpse of Ichigo's Shikai. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know everything that there is to know about Ichigo's Shikai form. We're going to be talking about Ichigo's zanpakuto, which is in a constant release state, as well as all of the new techniques that Ichigo demonstrates in this form. So without further delay, let's dive into my breakdown and analysis of Shikai Ichigo. Before the video begins, only 20% of the people who actually watch my content are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy these videos, then subscribe and stick around for more content just like this. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. Ichigo's Shikai is first revealed in chapter 67 of the manga and in episode 20 of the anime. Moments before Rukia was taken back to the Soul Society, Byakuya had destroyed the source of Ichigo's borrowed powers. He was left to bleed out and die in the rain. That is until the iconic appearance of Urahara, who not only saves Ichigo here, but also offers him a way to return his shinigami powers back to him. He explains that Byakuya had destroyed the source of his spirit energy, so now when his soul leaves the body, it won't be in his shinigami form. He'll be a regular human being with no spiritual powers, pretty much an ordinary soul that is chained to his physical body. The first step of Ichigo's training with Urahara is to first restore his spiritual energy. If he can do this, then he'll be able to control his spiritual body better. The more spirit energy that he has, the better that his spirit body will respond to him. The way that Ichigo is at the moment, he is struggling to breathe, but he needs to get to the point where he can move around in his spiritual body exactly the same as when he is in his physical body. Towards the end of chapter 60, after Ichigo no longer has trouble breathing or moving, and it appears as though he has recovered his spiritual energy, Tessai ends up cutting Ichigo's soul chain and then subsequently pinning him down to the ground. The portion of the soul chain that is still attached to his spirit body is beginning to corrode away. The chains appear to have grown several mouths which are eating away at the remainder of his soul chain, in a process that is called encroachment. In this current state, Ichigo has very little time to waste. This second lesson of Urahara's is called Shattered Shaft. If his soul chain corrodes completely, then he will transform into a hollow. The only way to avoid this is by becoming a shinigami. This portion of his training is to restore Ichigo's shinigami powers. He has about 72 hours to achieve this. It is here for the first time in the series that Ichigo enters into his inner world and is introduced to Old Man Zangetsu. He reveals to him that the shinigami powers that Byakuya had removed from him were those that were given to him by Rukia, but he had overlooked the fact that Ichigo has his own shinigami powers. Zangetsu goes on to explain that by borrowing Rukia's powers, he had awakened his own, but these inherited shinigami powers lay hidden deep within his soul, and this is partly the reason why Byakuya wasn't able to detect them. Ichigo now has 72 hours to find the piece of his soul which contains his shinigami powers. The skyscrapers around him begin crumbling into cubes. Ichigo's powers are in one of these boxes. When Ichigo realizes that he can sense the spiritual energy of the boxes via the soul ribbons, he quickly understands that the box containing his shinigami powers will have a red soul ribbon. Upon discovering the box, he sees the hilt of his zanpakuto. Drawing out the zanpakuto, an explosion erupts within Urahara's underground training facility, as it appears as though Ichigo has restored his shinigami powers, as he is donning the familiar black shinigami shihakusho, but with a strange twist, as strangely enough he is also wearing a frightening hollow mask on his face. Now, I made a separate video where I discussed everything that there is to know about the hollow mask and why it continued to reappear after Ichigo had gained his own shinigami powers, so I definitely recommend that you watch my hollow mask explained video too. But as for now, Ichigo has his shinigami powers restored, but he doesn't appear to have much of a zanpakuto, as in this initial phase it appears to be exactly the same blade that he was using when Rukia had given him her powers, and it is also in the same condition that it was in after Byakuya had cut it in two. He is using this broken zanpakuto to fend off Urahara's Shikai. Urahara then proceeds to cut through the remains of Ichigo's zanpakuto until only the hilt remains. This is during Urahara's third lesson. Ichigo has one simple objective. It's to knock Urahara's hat off of his head. He has a 5-minute limit to do so. It is during this third lesson that Ichigo realizes what Shikai is, as he remembers that Renji was also able to call upon the name of his zanpakuto. Urahara explains to him that every zanpakuto has a name. During this part of his training, Ichigo begins to run away from Urahara. when he begins to question why he is running away, and he asks himself if this is all the resolve that he has, and he begins to feel shame that he is behaving like a coward. The man from his inner world appears before him. He tells Ichigo to face forward, as he tells him that fear was preventing him from hearing his name before. He has only one enemy in front of him, and that there is nothing to fear. He tells him to let go of what he is afraid of and to advance forward. If he retreats, he will age. If he feels fear, then he will die. The old man reveals that his name is Zangetsu, as Ichigo shouts out his Zanpakuto's name, as Ichigo finally attains his Shikai, as we get to marvel at the new form of his Zanpakuto. Tessai and the others question the shape of Ichigo's Zanpakuto here, as they state that there is no hilt or guard, and his Zanpakuto does not have the shape of a normal sword. After attaining his Shikai, he is easily able to blow off Urahara's hat from his head, thus concluding his third and final lesson with Urahara. Now these questions in regards to the shape of Ichigo's new Zanpakuto are relevant, and it's all linked together with this idea that whenever Ichigo is in his Shinigami form, his Zanpakuto has a constant Shikai release. Now from the information that we learn later on during the 1000-year Blood War arc, Ichigo's Shikai and his subsequent Bankai that he learns were the result of him activating these powers with a broken sealed Zanpakuto, or one that wasn't properly incorporating all of the aspects of his powers, because we are aware that the manifestation of his Quincy powers, Old Man Zangetsu, was holding his powers back this entire time. So the small fraction that he was unable to hold back had manifested this limited Shikai and Bankai that he uses. Especially from the comments that Tessai makes, it is evident that the Shikai Ichigo demonstrates was an unstable form of a sealed Zanpakuto, thus explaining why it didn't have a proper hilt or a guard, and similar to his Zanpakuto in his substitute Shinigami form, it was oversized. Up until the 1000-year Blood War arc, Ichigo had assumed that he was using his true Shikai and Bankai, but this was far from the case. When a Shinigami is able to communicate and control the spirit of their Zanpakuto, they can manifest the Shikai transformation and the Bankai transformation, and they can also revert the sword back into its sealed state. Renji had told us in chapter 55 that a Zanpakuto can change size and shape depending on the spiritual strength of the owner. The size and shape is changed drastically when a user activates their Shikai, but for the most part, when a Zanpakuto is in its sealed state, it looks no different than an ordinary katana. But because at this point in the story, Ichigo had a pretty unstable sealed Zanpakuto, and he didn't really have a proper Asuchi, which had resulted in him wielding this abnormal Zanpakuto. So in this false Shikai form, Ichigo has several stat buffs. He has a substantial increase in his speed and power, as well as added endurance, which helps him to continue fighting even after he is injured, and to survive attacks which would have previously killed him. It is true that as Ichigo is getting stronger, he is able to endure attacks which would kill ordinary Shinigami, and this is again thanks to his untapped latent spiritual power, which as we know is the life force of a Shinigami. It is after he attains this form that he is able to use the Getsuga Tensho ability. This attack absorbs Ichigo's spiritual energy and condenses it to the tip of his blade. When he then swings for attack, the spiritual energy fires out of his blade, as the attack takes the shape of a crescent moon. While in this false Shikai state, Ichigo uses this attack several times, and he only learns proper control of this ability during his Bankai training, as in chapter 161, Zangetsu had told him that if you call out the name of an attack, then it will amplify the strength of it. The cloth that is wrapped around the handle of his Shikai Zanpakuto can either expand or contract. We see him take advantage of this as he uses the cloth to wrap up any injuries that he has sustained. This cloth is also used as a sheath to wrap around his blade when he isn't using it. We know that when Ichigo had entered into his inner world, he had seen Hollow Ichigo swinging around the sword through the cloth that is wrapped around the handle, demonstrating that it can also be used for long-range attacks. It is after he attains this form that Urahara allows Ichigo and the others to enter into the Soul Society. For the most part, Ichigo is in this form during his battles against Ikkaku, Renji, and Kinpachi, but for him to face off against Byakuya, he needs to learn the second release of his Zanpakuto, and in my next video I'm going to be talking about Ichigo's Bankai, covering all of the remarks that Byakuya had to say about Ichigo's Bankai when he had first witnessed it, as well as discussing the false nature of this Bankai, and how similar to this Shikai form, it was far from how Ichigo's true Bankai would look like. So definitely join me in my next video, and as for Ichigo's false Shikai form, I would love to hear all of your thoughts. What did you think about this form when you had first seen it? Were you as excited as I was to see Ichigo enter into the Soul Society with this new form, or do you feel like he was far too underprepared for the task that he had undertaken? And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.